Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening as your time zone is to this IOMP School webinar, which we have started as because of the COVID pandemic, the in-person physical meeting couldn't be possible, and therefore this educational thing we have started with a virtual platform, and this is the sixth webinar in this series. And I welcome all the participants for this sixth webinar of the IOMP School. And today's webinar is on the importance of certification and accreditation in medical physics. As you very well know, medical physicists working in a clinical environment are health professional dealing with the health of the human being, and their competency and expertise should be of high level. They should be competent, clinically qualified medical physicists. And IAEA publication on training course series number 56, which is endorsed by IOMP, talks about the model curriculum about the master's program in medical physics. Also, the IOMP policy statement number 2, the basic requirement of education, that is a basic degree in science or engineering, after that 2 years medical physics education, and after that at least 2 years residency program. And this residency program and education should be a very structured educational program with a residency under an experienced medical physicist. And the certification accreditation processes have been started. IOMP has started accreditation of medical physics education, also the residency and the CPD. At the same time, IMPCB, International Medical Physics Certification Board, is certifying the medical physicist. And therefore, in today's high-tech healthcare delivery system, let it be radiotherapy, radiodiagnosis, nuclear medicine, rather part, the importance of medical physics education is very, very high. And to give the talk on this aspect, we have today Professor Colin Orton. He doesn't require any introduction. He is so well known. He has spent more than, I think, almost 60 years in medical physics training, education, research, professional development. And presently, he is a Professor Emeritus Penn State University, Florida. He did his bachelor's in 1956-1959, then master's in radiation physics from University of London, and again Ph.D. in radiation physics from University of London. He served as editor of medical physics for almost 8 years. Since 2003, he is a Professor Emeritus at Penn University, Detroit. Since 2014, he is a President of International Medical Physics Certification Board, IMPCB. In 2015, he has got Mary Skłodowska-Curie Award from the International Organization of Medical Physics, very prestigious award. In 2003, he got IUPAC Award of Merit. So many awards, so many these things, it was very difficult, but I tried to make it a very, very short so that I do not take more of his time. 1998, he was in India for a Ramaya Naidu Memorial Oration Award, which is given by the AMPI. And he is also the winner of William D. Cooley Award from the AAPM. He was president of AAPM, president of ACMP, and president of IOMP also. I know because my PhD is from radiobiology, so I referred a lot of his radiobiology works, the NSDCRE, published over 20 books, 290 papers in referred journals, and 50 book chapters, and made over 600 presentations at national and international meetings. So we have among today the stalwart of the medical physics, Professor Colin Orton. Before I hand over floor to him, the recording of this webinar will be available within 2 or 3 days on the IOMP website. I request all of you to put up your video camera off and also the mute the microphone so that there's no disturbance. And during hearing the webinar or lecture or after that, you can put on your question through the chat. I will compile most of the questions and I will put to the speaker, Professor Colin Orton, and we'll have answer and discussion on this topic. With this thing, thanking Dr. Madan Rehani for giving me this opportunity, IOMP, I hand over the floor to Colin Orton for his talk. So the floor is yours, Professor Colin Orton.
Well, thank you, Arun. I hope everyone can see my screen. You mentioned I was Emeritus Professor at Wayne State University. That doesn't mean I stopped work. It means they don't pay me anymore and they expect me to do some teaching. But the reason, probably the main reason they've asked me to do this webinar is that I've been involved with the International Medical Physics Certification Board for several years. And we'll talk about that a bit later on. Well, let me start by explaining what I mean by certification and accreditation. There are lots of different definitions of those. Certification, I mean a demonstration that an individual medical physicist is qualified to act independently without supervision. So certification applies to individuals. On the other hand, accreditation...
Can you share your screen?
Oh no, I'm sharing my screen with myself here. Okay, let me end my show and start again. Okay, I've gone in to share my screen.
No.
Okay, we're doing it now, and we'll start again.
Now it has come.
Now we're okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, now you are here.
Okay, so you heard that. I think the main reason that I've been invited to do this webinar is because of my involvement with the IMPCB, International Medical Physics Certification Board. I'll talk a bit about that later on. So what do I mean by certification and accreditation? Certification, I think, applies to individuals. It's a demonstration that individuals are qualified to act independently as medical physicists without supervision. On the other hand, accreditation applies to programs, for instance, educational programs and programs that offer continuing medical professional development. So continued CPD programs are accredited, but also certification boards that meet certain standards can get accredited. I'll talk a bit about those later on. What other things might be involved in accreditation and certification? What other terms do we use? Well, registration is often used. A physicist might be registered in certain regulations to perform certain duties. It doesn't mean that necessarily that they've been certified. A lot of times registration requires certification, but a lot of times it doesn't. There are very wide variations between regulatory bodies on what registration means. Similarly with licensure, it's similar to the licensure of physicians. And for instance, in the USA, we do have some states that require licensure of physicists in order to practice. Quite rare, only a few states in the US. I'm not sure anywhere else in the world has licensure. I'm not going to talk about registration or licensure because there's so much variation to address. So I'm just going to talk about certification and accreditation. So what do we know about certification and accreditation? Because patients deserve and expect to be To get the best care possible, we need certification and accreditation. Medical physicists should have appropriate education and training. We addressed that a little earlier, and there's IOMP. Somebody's got their audio still on. Maybe they can turn it off. We can hear them in the background.
I am trying to do it one by one.
Okay, good.
Yeah, go ahead.
We can all hear them in the background. Somebody's talking. Medical physics education and training programs and events should meet appropriate standards. And medical physics certification board should be capable of deciding if examinees have the required education, training and experience to safely practice independently. Are you seeing this on your screen? Are you seeing this part of my screen over here on the right that's blocking some of it? I don't know how to get rid of that. If you're seeing it, I don't know what to do there. Remove, I don't know what that means.
It's visible. It's visible. It's visible to us.
It's visible. That's visible.
Yeah. Yeah,
how do I get rid of it?
Okay.
No, I don't get rid of it that way. I don't know how I get rid of all that on my screen. Okay. Hide video panel? Is that what I have to do? I don't know. Because you don't need to see all this on that side of the screen. And I don't know how to get rid of it. Anybody know how to get rid of that on my screen? No.
Must be, you can minimize, doctor.
You can minimize, yeah.
Minimize. How do I minimize it? Okay.
There's a minimizing button, plus and minus on either side.
Minimize up there. It says minimize. Hide thumbnail window. There we go. No, I've still got this here. Let's get rid of that. Okay. I've got this about waiting room up here and I want to get rid of that. How do I do that? I don't see any way of getting that. See waiting room? I don't want to see waiting room. No, still getting that. Okay. It's kind of interfering with my screen somewhat. Anybody know how to get rid of this up here about this? Do you see that? You see it says see waiting room up there?
Colin?
Yes.
It's Lynn Farabent. We're only seeing your slides, so
Are
don't
you
worry
good?
about anything
Yeah,
else you're seeing.
Excellent. Okay. So what constitutes appropriate education and training? And we've heard from Arun in his introduction, defined by IOMP policy statement number 2. And the title is Basic Requirements for Education and Training in Medical Physicists. And I'm going to refer to this quite often in this talk. What is the purpose of policy statement number 2? The stated purpose is to serve as a reference for medical physics organizations, educational institutions, and healthcare providers and authorities for planning and development of their national infrastructure for education, training, and certification of medical physicists and maintenance of standards of practice. So it's pretty comprehensive. IOMP policy statement number 2. So what do they say is appropriate education? According to the statement, it is a completion of a bachelor's degree in physics or an equivalent degree in a relevant physical and engineering science subject, followed by completion of a master's degree in medical physics or an equivalent degree in an appropriate physical science subject. So IOMP defines that a master's degree or higher is required to become a medical physicist. IAEA also addressed this issue and they have qualifications. It recommends that a clinically qualified medical physicist, CQMP, undergoes the following education and training, and that's defined in this document here, Human Health Series number 25. Firstly, a postgraduate degree in medical physics, And secondly, a period of structured clinical training. So that's your clinical training aspect of your education. So that's the IAEA statement. You can look that up in number 25 if you want to get into more details. And they do publish the course content and accreditation and continuing professional development. In this is training course series number 56 of IAEA, if you want to look into details of that. And they actually put a nice little chart here of what constitutes qualification of a medical physicist. I won't go over details of that now because I'm going to do it in the rest of my talk. So what else did it say about academic program accreditation? It said the suitability of a certain educational program to provide the necessary academic knowledge should be established through a suitable national or international accreditation body. Several countries, regions have such accreditation programs. For instance, in the US, we have CAMPAT. I'm sure most of you have heard of CAMPAT. And the IOMP, in fact, recently, a couple of years ago, formed a board to accredit educational and residency programs. So what programs have the IOMP accredited? They've accredited 4 degree programs so far. The first was the Master of Advanced Studies in Medical Physics at the ICTB in Italy, one of the major MS and PhD programs in the world, especially for candidates from developing countries. And then also 3 courses from South Korea. And 2 residency programs are soon to be evaluated by the IOMP. So the IOMP just started this process and they're actively accrediting courses and residency programs. Why should you have your program accredited? Well, in some countries, regions, you need to have your program accredited because graduation from an accredited program is required before medical physicists who graduate from your program can sit for board certifications. That's true in the USA, for example. You have to be a graduate from an accredited either master's or PhD program and a residency program. The status of your program will be evaluated if you apply for accreditation, and that's good. It's good to have your program evaluated by a group of experts. And I can attest from my own personal experience that the process of accreditation by a team of expert reviewers will invariably improve your program. I was running the program at Wayne State University when CAMPET started accrediting educational programs, and we were the first masters and the first PhD programs to become accredited. I can attest without doubt that the reviewers improved our program considerably. So it will improve your program by having it evaluated by a team of experts. So that's why you should have your program accredited. What about training? Again, according to IOMP policy statement number 2, medical physicists who have clinical responsibility should have received additional to their education clinical competency training. That's also in that IAEA document that I mentioned. This should be carried out under the supervision of a certified medical physicist, a CMP, specialized in the same subfield, or a qualified professional with the level of professional experience and expertise equivalent to that for a CMP. Why do we say that? Why does the IOMP say that? Because, of course, most countries in the world don't have a lot of certified medical physicists to direct their supervision in their clinical training. So we realize that. Hopefully, eventually, this won't be true and everybody will be supervised by a certified medical physicist in their training. For an appropriate duration, well, what is an appropriate duration according to the IOMP and the IAEA? the duration of clinical competency training should not be less than 2 years full-time equivalent, preferably in the form of a residency or equivalent to a clinical residency program. For those jurisdictions in which accreditation program exists for residency, such as in the USA, the residency should be an accredited program. What about professional certification of individuals? Again, IOMP policy statement number 2, medical physicists practicing in medical physics institutions or those with clinical responsibilities should be subject to professional certification. Medical physics organizations or health competent authorities should establish their own national professional certification systems to facilitate such processes. That's in the IOMP statement, that's in the IAEA statement. In countries where establishment of such a national certification system is impractical, probably most countries in the world, consideration should be made to have their medical physicists certified by an appropriate external certification body. What about certification board accreditation? To ensure that an appropriate level of professional standard can be achieved and maintained, national certification systems should be subject to appropriate quality audits. This could be achieved through an independent accreditation process within that country conducted by a well-established national body or an international certification or accreditation body. And this is all in the new IEA publication that's now in preparation. We talked about it earlier before you all came on the air. Madan has told us that this probably won't be coming out for another 6 months or so. It's in preparation and it takes a long time to get through the publication process at IAEA. But this is going to be part of the IAEA training course series. It deals with the need and benefits of medical physics certification. There will be guidelines on the establishment of national and regional certification schemes, and it will be endorsed by the IOMP, the IMPCB, the Medical Physics Certification Board, and the AAPM, amongst others. So that's in press. It will be coming out probably within the next 6 months to a year. What about maintenance of certification? Well, that's addressed again in policy statement number 2. A professional competency maintenance scheme should be implemented for certified medical physicists who have clinical responsibilities. This could be in the form of recertification after an appropriate period of time, 5 or 10 years, and participation in a mandatory continuing professional development program. Well, what kind of program are we talking about? Well, medical physics organizations should establish and maintain their own national CPD systems to support the continual professional development of their members. In countries which establishment of such a CPD program is impractical, arrangements should be made for the medical physicist to enter a well-established external CPD system. And I think that's a weakness right now of the entire profession. There are very few of these established external CPD systems. And I know that IOMP is working on this. What about accreditation of continuing professional development events? Records of CPD by individuals include points obtained while attending or participating in educational or scientific events. The events need to be accredited by an appropriate organization, and the IOMP has recently initiated event accreditation. And there are many other organizations like HAMPEP that accredit such events so that people that can then collect points by attending such events. Why should medical physicists get certified? Great question. There are lots of people listening to this who aren't yet certified and want to know, why should I do this? Why should I go through this project? Well, in many countries, to practice clinical medical physics independently, you need to be a qualified medical physicist, a QMP or a CQMP. And a requirement to be recognized in many of these countries is that you're board certified. What other additional incentives are there to become board certified? Well, in many countries, regulatory bodies require facilities to have qualified medical physicists on staff to perform specific duties, quality assurance, radiation safety, etc. Certification enhances one's importance to your institution. So if it's important that institutions have some certified medical physicists, so it enhances your importance if you're certified. It's also good job security if you're certified, and often means an increase in salary. I remember when we were having certification in my program at Wayne State University, I would persuade my administrators to tie in an increased salary to somebody getting certified. So they got certified, they got an increased salary, and they often got promoted to the next step in their promotion ladder. And of course, it looks great on your CV to say that you're certified, especially if you're going to be applying for another job. Sometimes it's a requirement of the other job that you be certified. By the way, before I talk about the next step here, why did I get certified? Well, I didn't get certified for any of those reasons. Interestingly, I got certified because I was running a graduate medical physics program. I was telling all my students, as soon as you get your certificate, your degree, I want you to go and get certified. It's very important to get certified. And I wasn't certified myself. I've been practicing for about 15 years. I didn't need to get certified. A lot of medical physicists at that time were not certified. There was no requirement to be certified to practice clinical medical physics. But I thought it was pretty hypocritical of me not to get certified when I'm telling all my students, you better get certified. So I did it. And interesting, at the time that I did it, one of my colleagues on staff was the chairman of the physics board of the American Board of Radiology. And he came into my office. As soon as I got back to my office and he got back to his office, he walked in and he said, Colin, I shouldn't be telling you the results yet. They're not official, but I'll tell you your results if you like. I said, sure, I want to know my results. This was after my oral exam. He said, Colin, I have some good news and some bad news. Oh my God, bad news. What's the good news? He said, well, the good news is you came second overall of all the examinees. So I said, well, what can be the bad news? He said, one of your students beat you. And by the way, I expected that student to beat me. That student eventually became president of the AAPM and was a very highly acclaimed medical physicist. Okay, how can all this be achieved? Countries or regions need to establish programs to regulate who is qualified to practice medical physics independently. Accreditation of education and training programs is very important, and certification by a local, regional, or international board has to be achieved. So is there an international certification board? And of course, yes, there is. It's the IMPCB, and it was established 10 years ago. So let me talk a little bit about the IMPCB and what it's been doing. What were the origins of the IMPCB? Well, it was established, the IOMP in 2009 established a task group to investigate formation of an international certification board. The goal was to improve the quality of clinical medical physicists and the profession as a whole. So what were the initial members? There were initially 11 charter members: Brazil, USA, Australasia, China, Taiwan, Mexico, Hong Kong, Iraq, South Korea, Lebanon, and Nepal. There was one observing member at that time, Japan, and since then several other members have joined. Another Hong Kong, the Institute of Medical Physics in Hong Kong, the Japan Board of Medical Physics joined, Nigeria, India, Canada, and the IOMP is now joined as an official member. So what were the initial activities? Initial activities were a model certification program was written and adopted in 2011. 2012, the bylaws were adopted. And then in 2014, the officers and first board of directors were elected. So although it was formed in 2010, it never really became really active officially until 2014, when we had a board of directors. So what were the initial board of directors? Well, it was very international. As it happens, I was their first president. CEO was Raymond Wu. We're both still in those positions. Secretary General was Timothy Chang of Taiwan. Registrar and Chair of Records Committee was Tae-Suk Soo of South Korea. Chief Examiner was Thomas Cron of Australia. The Treasurer was Alejandro Rodriguez Laguna of Mexico. And several at-large board members. We have 4 at-large board members: Canada, China, USA, and Hong Kong. What's happened subsequently? Well, there was a problem. The IMPCB, although it was formed by a task group of the IOMP, was never officially established with any formal link to the IOMP, but as an independent organization. In 2014, it was realized that the IMPCB would have more international recognition if it was seen to be formally linked to the IOMP. In November of 2014, an IOMP-IMPCB task group was formed to investigate how to increase the involvement of the IOMP in the governance of the IMPCB. So what actions were taken? The task group proposed significant changes to the IMPCB bylaws, including specifications that there would be 3 IOMP representatives on the board of directors. At that time, there was just 1. Members would now be called supporting organizations, not just members, and the IOMP would be designated the principal supporting organization. These were approved by the IMPCB in May of 2015 and by the IOMP in June of 2015. Let's look at the purposes of the board. The purpose of the board was stated to establish minimum standards and improve the practice of medical physics, to develop standards and procedures for certification of medical physicists, and to establish the infrastructure requirements and assessment procedures for accreditation of medical physics certification programs. So 2 things there: certification of medical physicists and accreditation of medical physics certification programs. Further objectives were to establish and evaluate qualifications of candidates requesting exam for certification in the field. So establish their qualifications, to arrange and conduct exams to test the competence of candidates in the field, and all these you'll see later on we've been doing, to grant and issue certificates in the field of medical physics to applicants who have been found qualified by the board. So certification, and to give certificates to those certified individuals. And to maintain a registry of holders of such international certification. As I mentioned, in 2011, a model program was developed to oversee all of this. The purpose to be used to evaluate certification boards that have applied for accreditation and to establish criteria for IMPCB examination of individual medical physicists. What was the stipulation? Certification should be by examination, conducted by a country-specific, geographically regional, or other designated medical physics certification board. And the model program was developed in accord with IOMP policy statement number 2. What was the format? The format that in the now this is a model program. Boards don't have to abide by this, but in fact, all the boards that have been accredited so far abided by this. Part 1, a written exam to test the competence of the candidate in fundamental aspects of medical physics. Call that general medical physics. That's part 1. Part 2, written exam to determine the competence of the candidate in a specialty area of medical physics. And in part 3, an oral exam to determine the candidate's knowledge and fitness to practice clinical medical physics in a designated specialty. So the IMPCB formed an accreditation committee which had the following responsibilities: to establish guidelines and procedures to evaluate national certification programs, applying for accreditation based on the model certification program. To oversee the work of 3 accreditation subcommittees, they're called AC1, 2, and 3, develop parts 1, parts 2, and 3 exam respectively. That's for the IMPCB individual certification exams. And to prepare and administer these individual certification exams. So the accreditation committee has basically 2 roles: 1, to accredit certification programs, and 2, to develop the individual exams for medical physicists. The current committee is chaired by Adel Mustafa of the USA. AC1 is chaired by Habib Zaidi of Switzerland. AC2 for the Part 2 exam, chaired by Golem Zakaria of Germany. And the Part 3 exam is chaired by Seon Kim of the USA. So what certification boards have so far been accredited? The Korean Medical Physics Certification Board, the Hong Kong Institution of Physicists in Medicine Certification Board, and another Hong Kong board, the Hong Kong Association of Medical Physics Certification Board. 2 boards in Hong Kong. I won't go into details of why there are 2 boards, other than to say that one of them was primarily involved with certification of people working for the Hong Kong government, and the other was for people working in private institutions. They have been working together more recently since they've both become accredited, so that they each examine all candidates. By the way, this was not an unusual thing. I remember in the USA many years ago, we used to have 2 certification boards, the American Board of Medical Physics and the American Board of Radiology. Ultimately, we got together, and for those topics that the ABR certified medical physicists in, the ABMP merged with the ABR. And then for other topics like magnetic resonance, imaging physics, and hospital radiation safety physics, the ABMP still certified. So this is not unusual. Additional boards are being evaluated for accreditation. The College of Medical Physics of India is being evaluated right now. Chinese Society of Medical Physics in Taipei is being evaluated. And expressed an interest is Bangladesh. So several boards are under consideration right now. What about individual certification of medical physicists? Certification exams only began 3 years ago, so these are pretty new. So far, exams have been held in many places, at the ICTP in Trieste many times, Dhaka, Prague, Mexico City, Riyadh, Amman, Vienna, Santiago, and Doha. Over 150 candidates have started into the exam process in the last 3 years. 29 have now completed all parts and become IMPCB certified. An additional 51 candidates have passed parts 1 and 2 are now eligible to take the oral exams. What about specialties? Current specialties are radiation oncology physics, diagnostic and interventional radiological physics. Imminent specialties, these are coming very soon, nuclear medicine physics. They're the three topics that we're probably going to examine in from now for many years. But there are other future specialties that are a long way off and maybe will never occur. These are things like non-ionizing radiation physics, medical health physics, and physiological measurement. So right now we're examining radiation oncology, diagnostic radiology, and soon nuclear medicine physics. What does the IMPCB require in continual professional development? To maintain IMP certification, a certified medical physicist must satisfy CPD requirements. Have there been any developments during this COVID-19 pandemic? Well, yes, they have. Interestingly, 2 candidates who were conditioned in one of the 5 subspecialties of the Part 3 oral exam, so they failed one of the 5 parts of the exam. The oral exam has 5 subspecialties, and they failed one of the 5 subspecialties. They've now been examined remotely via Zoom in the 1 subspecialty they failed. So we took advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic to try out Zoom for doing their oral exams. 1 further condition candidate exam is pending. The accreditation committee, in fact, we meet, I think it's tomorrow, to, again, remotely, to explore whether it might be possible to conduct some of the Part 3 exams, the full exams for all 5 subtopics via Zoom. A lot of candidates would like to do this. They've expressed an interest in doing this. Doing Part 3 exams orally in person, it's very expensive. You've got to get all your examiners there at that site, and that's not cheap. And the candidate has to get to that site, which is not inexpensive. If we could do it all for many of the candidates remotely via Zoom, that would be great. So that is being considered by the accreditation committee as we speak. What activities are there ahead for the IMPCB? Well, we need to continue, of course, to accredit national and certification programs, and we have some in progress. Help countries develop national boards. I never mentioned that before, and I should have done. One of the objectives of the IOMPCB, if you go to the website, you'll see, is to help countries that don't have national boards to establish their own boards. So we need to do that. We are working with Bangladesh right now, for example, to help them develop their national boards, and then we'll get involved in certifying that board. Maintain a registry of certified medical physicists. We need to keep doing that, and we need to work on how people are going to demonstrate that they meet the CPD requirements. Conduct exams of medical physicists. We need to continue doing that. And I didn't mention, and I should have done, that we don't certify medical physicists who have access to their own certification program. So if a physicist is working in a country that has its own certification program, like the United States, for instance, then we don't certify medical physicists from that country, because they should get certified in their own country. We want to support countries setting up their own certification system, so clearly we don't want to get involved in certifying physicists from those countries. And we want to continue issuing certificates. Now, if you want to read more about IMPCB, just go to our website, impcb.org. You'll read about the history, you read about model programs, you read about the bylaws. And by the way, if you're thinking of getting certified, just click on exam right at the top of the IMPCB.org page. Click on exam, and it will give you all of the information about getting certified by the IMPCB. So let me explain. There's an international article. There's an article on International Medical Physics Certification Board. It's in Medical Physics International, published earlier this year, and it's written by Thomas Cron et al. So go and have a look at that, and you'll see details of the history and achievements of the first decade of this board. So let me summarize my talk. It's important that medical physicists become certified. It's important that medical physics education and training programs become accredited. It's important that medical physicists in countries that do not currently have certification accreditation programs develop their own national programs. And the IOMP and the IOMP and the IMPCB continue to develop and expand their certification and accreditation activities. Okay, thank you all for listening, and I'll stop sharing my screen. And I think, Arun, we're ready to address any questions. I'm sure you've been accumulating them for me.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Colin Orton, for giving the importance of certification and accreditation of medical physics education and the activities being carried out by IOMP, IAEA, and IMPCB in this direction. But still, lots to be need to be done in this direction. That is what the people are asking question. Just I will take one by one question. This asked, what is the best option for a medical physicist working in a country where there is no professional medical physics organization nor the certification board? How to get the certification of a medical physicist where in that country no certification board is?
Right, go to the IMPCB website and click on exams, and you'll find all the details right there. In terms of setting up an organization in your country, if you don't have an organization, probably you have meetings that many medical physicists go to. Organize something at those meetings where the physicists get together and work on setting up your own organization in your own country. That's exactly what we did in the USA in the 1950s. People got together at a meeting and said, let's form an organization.
Okay, there's another question. For nuclear medicine area, is a certification being offered by IMPCB? And if not, how long it is going to take?
I would say probably within a year we'll have certification of medical physicists in nuclear medicine. We've formed a committee to start building our question bank. Once we have a significant question bank, we'll start organizing the certification exams. So within a year, I would say. Okay.
Already you have explained about this thing, but there's a question from Bede Madhu that he's asking, due to COVID-19, the certification examination, how long one has to wait and give this examination so as to get the certification?
As I say, we're going to be discussing that with the accreditation committee. I think it's tomorrow. And again, as I said, remotely, we have a meeting scheduled. Follow us on impcb.org and you'll see it will, once we've decided on anything, it will be posted.
Now, another question which has come is the certification maintenance, like there is a mechanism of AAPM, please clarify. Maintenance of the certification which IMPCB has given, is there any mechanism to have the maintenance or recertification as in AAPM?
We have CAMPEP in AAPM, and CAMPEP is available to keep the records of people certified by the American Board of Radiology, so these are in the USA, and they keep the record. The AAPM is right now in the process of voting to form an international council. This is new. One of the things that I want the International Council to do, and I'm going to push for, is to open up CAMPET to the world. So that anyone in the world, and I don't know if this is going to happen, but I'm going to push hard for it, anyone in the world can get CAMPET credits to demonstrate continuing professional development, or as they call it in the USA, CME, continuing medical education. So I hope it's coming, but I can't guarantee it.
Okay. There are some questions that there is so much of inhomogeneity in the educational standards among the various countries. How are we going to harmonize and standardize this education system of medical physics and also certification?
With great difficulty.
Yeah.
In fact, it's not really fair in many countries for us to assume that they can do it. They can't because they don't have the resources to do it. On the other hand, if we encourage each country to develop their own programs of accreditation of educational programs, eventually we'll harmonize the education of medical physicists. I don't see it coming in the next year or two, but maybe in the next 10 years, we'll be able to harmonize the education and training of medical physicists.
Many countries have a residency program, and for a certification, one needs at least minimum 2 years residency program. But the duration in some countries is 1 year or even less than 1 year, or which is not structured. How they can get the IMPCB certification?
Remember, the IMPCB certification has guidelines, but not necessarily that have to be all followed. So, for example, if a country has, say, a 1 year residency or 1 year equivalent residency requirement, then that will be considered by the IMPCB. I can't guarantee it will be approved, but it will be considered because the IMPCB just recommends that 2 years is important. So I suspect that many countries will find that 1 year will be sufficient because there just aren't the resources to do more.
Okay. And there is question that this IMPCB certification which is being given, what is its authority and validity in a country where the health ministry or the controlling authority do not recognize these kind of certificates? To how to sort out these problems?
I think that has to be done locally. I think the physicists have to try to influence the local authorities, and we have met occasionally with the authorities. IMPCB officers have met with the authorities to encourage them to adopt IMPCB certification as being sufficient to recognize qualified medical physicians.
Okay, and then can IMPCB can take the help of IAEA to implement or to make the certification of IMPCB more acceptable to the countries, member countries?
Absolutely, yes. IAEA have been all the way along very supportive of the IMPCB and its examinations and its accreditation of programs. So I suspect that IAEA can be very influential in having IMPCB certification recognized.
Okay. there is one question.
And let me point out, remember I said the IAEA are preparing a document that will be released in 6 months to a year's time. In that, they specifically mention IMPCB certification as being desirable for qualified medical physicists.
And now, as you have talked in your talk, that IMPCB has certified from Korea and then Hong Kong to certification bodies. Any other bodies they have been recognized by IMPCB?
Yes, I did mention that. I mentioned that India is one, Australasia is another, and Bangladesh, which actually hasn't formed a board yet, but we're going to help them form a board, and then we'll help that board to become accredited. So other countries have expressed an interest, but they're the ones that are most actively being studied right now.
Okay. And one question, but that is, I think, okay, do we have to be CAMPEP accredited to apply for this board?
No, not at all.
If one has the CAMPEP, then it is hit twice, I think, right?
Right. Equivalent to CAMPEP is so you have to have done a residency that's equivalent to what CAMPEP requires. Probably, if you can, 2 years of residency. In some countries, maybe 1 year of residency.
Okay. Okay. And other than the ionizing radiation, for non-ionizing radiation application, the certification from the IMPCB?
Long way off.
No. Okay.
It's something that we mentioned that we might do in the future.
Okay. So, but because of the COVID, the virtual examinations, what already have been done, I think in 2 cases, you are going to continue the virtual examination if the situation doesn't improve. Am I right?
The situation is that we're going to discuss this amongst the accreditation committee. I mentioned there's probably, I think it's tomorrow that we're meeting, and there is some resistance to doing that, but others on the committee believe that it's important to do it. So it's under discussion. I suspect, well, first of all, the American Board of Radiology are going to start doing that next year. And if they do it, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do it with IMPCB. And I suspect that if it doesn't come before that, it will come after that. But it's being actively discussed right now.
Okay. And also one question is there, the medical physics education is accredited, but the teacher who is teaching, does he need the accreditation of his master's program to be a teacher?
I don't have a problem with that as long as they have the equivalent experience that is necessary to be a teacher of that. As I said, when I used to teach, when I first started teaching, I wasn't accredited. I went 15 years teaching before I got accredited. Many medical physicists in the old days didn't ever get accredited, and yet they ran major teaching programs.
Is it any applicable idea to do part 1 and part 2 by internet exam like part 3?
Again, that's going to be discussed probably tomorrow at this accreditation committee meeting. I see it happening. It can't happen right now because you can't do those exams. Most people have stopped examining candidates altogether right now with the COVID-19 crisis. But eventually, I see as it happening, but maybe within the next year, maybe not.
Okay. I see more questions which are getting repeated or the same content which you have already explained. So already time we have come to the end. So I thank all the participants and you, and I will just, okay, sorry, just a moment, because the next webinar, which is going to be there of IOMP, Okay. Okay. Dear participant, the next IOMP webinar series in this thing will be on the 9th September 2020, 12 p.m. GMT to 1 p.m. GMT. And this will be from radiobiological challenges to imaging biomarkers in personalized radiotherapy. And there will be 2 talks. One is by Loredana G. Marco.
Arun, we can't see your screen.
I have shared.
Just a blank screen right now.
I just shared it. I don't know how it's not possible.
Arun, you have to double click
Can you
when
see
you want
it
to
now?
share.
Ada akses VT lagi kan?
Could you please?
Yeah, double click.
Can you see it now? Resume share. Okay.
No.
No, can
The lower right corner, there's the share. You have to
Yeah, already
Balik
done
semua
that.
di sini, kalau ke kanan.
Already done that. So again, I stop share.
Medina,
Sharing is paused. Why this is paused? I don't
Medina.
know. Okay. Is it okay now? No.
Interesting
Not
that
coming.
the display shows that
you have to double click, Arun. Double click.
No.
I had the same problem when I first got on. I saw somewhere else I had to click. There were 2 places I had to click share screen.
New share I have to go?
I found 2 places to share the screen. I think the
Maybe-
bottom
The
right-hand
lower
corner,
right corner.
Maybe
the bottom right corner, I saw in red. It said,
Colin, you can say stop share and then it may have.
oh,
Yeah.
Is it okay? No?
No, no.
Okay. I don't know, but okay. Already, at least on my screen, I'm able to see and it is shared. Resume share, also not possible. No, man. Break 2 rules, pause recording, stop recording, meet, hide.
You can mention the dates and tomorrow we are announcing it anyway.
Yeah.
Everybody
So
will
this will
get
be
it tomorrow.
Yeah, this will be on the 9th September, and this will be on radiobiological challenges to imaging biomarkers in personalized radiotherapy. There will be 2 talks, one by Loredana Marco and another is Luliana Toma Dasu, and the topics will be biomarkers for hypoxia and proliferation from imaging to outcome prediction, and second will be biomarkers for cancer stem cell from imaging to outcome prediction. So all the participants I welcome to this next webinar of IOMP, which is on the 9th September. With this thing, I thank once again to all the participants and Professor Colin Orton for the excellent talk and also answering a lot of your queries and questions about the certification, accreditation, and how it can be done about the things. And with this, I thank IOMP, especially Professor Madan Rehani, the President, for giving this opportunity, and look forward to meet you all again on 9th September 2020 for IOMP School webinar. Thank you very much.